Welcome to the Higher Ed Retire Podcast with your host, Greg Shepard. Greg is a fee-only financial advisor who specializes in helping those in higher education to take control of their retirement. Since 2001, Greg has helped employees all over the country make the most of their retirement plans.
Hey folks, Greg Shepard here, Higher Ed Retire Podcast. As always, I am your humble host, and I do appreciate all you folks out there taking time out of your day to listen to this silly little podcast I've had now for quite some time, getting some good feedback from everyone out there too, both from this podcast and my YouTube channel. I'm quite shocked that folks pay attention to me over YouTube, but if you haven't checked it out, go ahead and check out that YouTube channel. You could probably just, type in the search bar, Higher Ed Retire, or my name, Greg Shepard, and it'll probably lead you to me eventually. Today, folks, I did do a YouTube video on today's topic, and it garnered a lot of attention and got a lot of questions, so I decided to make a podcast episode on it as well. So the title is TIAA, TIAA, Cautionary Tale. Now, it's not a cautionary tale using TIAA. It's a cautionary tale how someone did use TIAA and basically just didn't listen to advice is the best way to put it. I'm not going to beat around the bush here. Just didn't listen to things that I told him and kind of backed up on them. I mean, lack of a better term here. So if you've listened to these podcasts before, you know that our goal here is to educate you, arm you with as much information as possible so you can go out there and make educated decisions around your higher ed retirement plan. Again, my name is Greg Shepard. I do have an independent financial advisory firm here in the Kansas City area. But with the evolution of technology, go figure, I'm able to help everyone and anybody across the country in that regard. I have been doing so for 21 years now. The gray hair on my head proves it. If you want to get in touch with me regarding this topic or any other topic you listen to in my episodes, feel free to do so. You don't have to be a client of mine. My email is greg@shepardfinancial.com. Shepard is spelled SHEPARD, then financial.com. And I've also been told that this one little sentence, singular, keeps the attorneys, plural, at bay. Investment advisory services offered by me, Greg Shepard, as an investment advisor rep of S&A Financial Services, which is a registered investment advisor. That is my firm, S&A Financial Services. If you're wondering, okay, let's kick it off here. So TIAA, Cautionary Tale. What am I talking about here? So I don't have anything written down, kind of shooting from the hip here. I'm just going to explain what occurred, and hopefully you don't put yourself in this situation either. So I'll start off by telling you that this individual is on the West Coast, which really is irrelevant, doesn't mean anything in terms of this episode. But this gentleman was on the West Coast, contacted me. The purpose of him contacting me, and everyone out there listening, feel free to do the same. The purpose of him contacting me was really to set an appointment, which he did through my online, what we call Calendly service. It's an online appointment service, right? And we set up a Zoom meeting, 30-minute meeting, free of charge, no big deal. I do it all the time. And again, the goal wasn't really for him to become a client. The goal for him was really to bounce ideas off of me that he was told by an advisor, a financial advisor. He actually found this individual locally in his area that held those, retirement seminars, basically. You get those postcards that had those nice, juicy pictures of steaks and all the good food on them, and come to my seminar, we'll feed you. You'll eat like kings, and we'll give you all kinds of information. That's kind of the thing of the past, those seminars. But this individual did go to one, liked the individual speaking, the advisor. I'm sure he's a good person, knowledgeable, dresses well, speaks well, and won this individual over, which is perfectly fine, okay? That's not the meat of the story, no pun intended. What occurred is this individual, we'll call him John, we'll call him the prospect John. John went to the advisor's office after the seminar. The folks at the advisor's office contacted John. John went in for an appointment, free of charge, which is perfectly fine, and laid out a game plan, I use air quotes, game plan regarding this individual, John's higher ed retirement plan. Now, keep in mind, the advisor has no experience or little experience. I'm not sure. given what happened, I would say no experience with higher ed retirement plans. And if you've listened to my YouTube videos and podcasts here, I always stress the fact, if you're going to use a financial advisor, fee-only financial advisor, make sure he or she knows what they're talking about when it comes to higher ed retirement plans. Or something like this, something similar, could happen to you. Okay. And before I get going, I feel like I was joking with my wife that I know, all of you out there are in higher education in some form or fashion. A lot of you out there are professors. Now I feel like, or I know what you feel like, just as a teacher in general, when you tell your students, and I was probably one of those students, you tell your students to do something, okay? Do X, which will get you closer to the solution Y, the letter Y, right? So do X, get you to the solution Y. Well, your students go out there and they do ABC trying to get to Y, so it's a totally different direction. And they come back to you and say, Mr. and Mrs. Professor, what you told me didn't work, and why didn't it work? And you throw your hands up and say, well, probably because you did ABC instead of the X that I told you to do. So it's like you try to teach folks something, but they do the complete opposite, and they expect the result to be the same as what you discussed. Man, I'm tripping over my words there, but I hope you get the idea. I say this kind of tongue-in-cheek because that's what happened with this individual. So let me continue here. So John's at the advisor's office. The advisor says, hey, let's put together a game plan that incorporates you getting into my system, and we're going to get far away as we can from TIAA. Now, here's where the rub is. The advisor, let me fill you in on a little secret. Most advisors out there, if they're not familiar or, how do I word this, experienced with TIAA CREF, they probably don't have an institutional or professional relationship like my firm does and other firms out there as well. So they're not as educated with the products and investments within, especially TI traditional. So this individual, John, I think he had 8 or 9 different contracts. Some of you out there, most of you out there are probably pretty familiar with that if you've gone through various universities over the course of time. So John has various contracts, which he had TIAA traditional in each one. Now, this advisor did figure out the fact that some of these contracts, the TI traditional, was liquid. Immediately, advisor says, we're out of TI traditional. I want you, John, out of TI traditional, because what we can provide over here, where we custody our assets, like at Fidelity or Schwab, or it doesn't matter, we can beat TI traditional. And let's stop right there, okay? And I'll kind of break this down into different parts. So again, TI traditional, liquid accounts, multiple accounts. Advisor says, let's pull it all out. And John, of course, didn't ask any questions because the advisor is, in quotes here, the fiduciary advisor is supposed to do what's in the best interest of the client. The advisor says, we can do better than what TI traditional is offering you. Now, again, I'll say stop right there. The reason this advisor said this is that the advisor said that we can beat TI traditional, getting whatever, 5%, because we're going to put money in the stock market over here that historically has done better than 5%. Okay, now, that is true, but let's back up a little bit. The purpose of TI traditional is to guarantee a fixed rate, okay? And let's just use 5%, okay, for hypothetical sakes here. So your TI traditional is getting 5%. That is a great alternative, in my opinion. And by the way, nothing I say here is investment advice. Don't go out there and implement this stuff tomorrow, okay? Make sure you contact a competent independent financial advisor prior to doing anything within TI CREF, okay, folks? But the idea of TI traditional is really to have that bond sleeve, okay? Bond sleeve. Yes, any competent advisor, heck, you out there listening, if you just throw a dart at a dartboard, over time, the stock, the equity portion of your account should beat that TI traditional over time. But you introduce volatility with that, right? So we're not comparing apples to apples. So for that advisor to say, yeah, we're going to take that TI traditional getting 5% guaranteed, throw it over here in the stock market, we're going to beat that 5%. Yes, over time, but is that really what you're trying to accomplish? Okay, make sure you ask yourself that. What are we trying to accomplish? Now, I will tell you this. I'm going to do a different podcast episode on this. In retirement, the goal isn't really to hit home runs, all right? And that's what you accomplish typically in the stock market. You strike out a lot too. We're looking for principal preservation and then producing income with that portfolio, right? So we're not comparing apples to apples here. Stock market, TIAA traditional, they're not the same. They shouldn't be even talked about in the same sentence. So there was strike number one. Now, let me preface this. This John here in this case did contact me, and at this point, I'm talking to John about the recommendations this advisor gave to John. And I told John here specifically, well, I wouldn't necessarily do what you're talking about because you can get 5% in the TIAA traditional. Equities are great. Yeah, I agree. Over time, you can get better performance over time, but that's not what you're trying to do anymore. You're done with your accumulation phase, okay? Let's stick over here in TIAA traditional, maybe introduce new money in TIAA traditional. On some of these contracts, we're looking at 5.5% liquid. Are you kidding me? Any fiduciary advisor that says that's not a good plan isn't necessarily doing what's in the best interest of you. Now, also on that note, let's piggyback off that. This advisor, remember, on the West Coast here, which is irrelevant, pulled the money out of TIAA traditional liquid accounts and all the CREF money, by the way, which is okay. I'll get to that here in just a bit. That advisor cannot, make sure you listen here closely, that advisor cannot get paid on the monies inside TIAA CREF. Okay, most folks that don't have an institutional advisory relationship with TIAA CREF, that advisor has to pull money out of TIAA CREF, custody the money over at, let's say, Fidelity, and then draw his or her fee from that, your fee that goes to the advisor from that account. Okay, that's the number one reason why I see a lot of advisors just automatically just pull money out of TIAA CREF because they can't get paid on it. Okay, and so is that a conflict of interest? That's for you to decide. Okay, so let's move on. And I told John, if I were you, I would certainly put together, I didn't put together numbers or anything, but I would put together a game plan that incorporates or utilizes TIAA traditional because of the new high interest rates that we've realized within the last, 8 months, 10, 12 months, something like that. And I said strongly look at utilizing that for your bond sleeve of your portfolio, and then you can extract from that liquid account as needed for income. So there was strike one. He didn't listen to that, did the exact opposite. Strike two, I told John and I told everybody else, my firm charges 1%. Okay, that's our cost. That's our fee, 1% per year. And I told John, don't have an advisor, in my opinion, don't have the advisor charge you more than 1%. If he or she's just doing investment planning, investment management, maybe giving you advice on some other things, financially speaking, 1% is sufficient. And also, John, in this case, do not have that advisor charge on the TIAA traditional monies if there's any left over. I would never do that because there's nothing the advisor can do on that money. It just sits there, earns interest, and there's different strategies you can implement, but the advisor really doesn't do anything on that money. So not only does the advisor charge John 1.2%, but the advisor is charging on the whole kit and caboodle, including TIAA traditional. Strike two did the exact opposite. Now, let's get into strike three. What this advisor did, unbeknownst to him and actually unbeknownst to John until he watched my video, the advisor did realize, I guess we'll give him credit here, he did realize that in his illiquid account, a TIAA traditional investment was paying over 6%, which is phenomenal, right? So the advisor said, hey, let's identify that as an account we want to utilize. Let's go ahead and tomorrow dump in, I don't remember the exact dollar amount. We're talking like $200,000-$300,000 into that account. Sounds great, right? We're going to get 6.25%. That is awesome. This is during the time period in 2022 when the market was down, bond market wasn't doing very well. So that is very, very attractive. Now, if you've listened to my episodes and watch and listen to my videos on YouTube, you should have immediately recognized what I stated here when he dumped that money in the illiquid account. So what happens when you dump $200,000 or $300,000 into an illiquid TIAA traditional account? Boom, it's locked up. So actually, it was John that brought it to the advisor's attention that, hey, just out of curiosity, this money that you, advisor, put into TIAA traditional, I know John has quite a bit of money. I know it's not chump change by any means, but it's a small-ish portion of my retirement. That money is accessible. Is that correct? We can access that money. And the advisor said, yes, of course we can. And John said, well, let's, I don't know. I don't know if I agree. Let me call TIAA real quick. And sure enough, there were probably some choice words being had between John and the advisor once they figured out that 3 days ago, or whatever the case was, John dumped in $200,000 to $300,000 into a TIAA traditional account. I think it was it was money that was in the account, so the money was already there. It's not like he took it from a different contract. And the advisor dumped money from CREF into TIAA traditional, and boom, just locked it up. And the only way he can get it out, I think in his case, was a 5 or 10-year TPA. 10-year TPA is the most common, or lifetime income annuity option. So, but I tell you what, word to the wise, man. And so John comes knocking on my door, figuratively speaking. We actually spoke on the phone, and says, hey, what do I do? And I said, well, now it was a polite conversation between myself and John, but I said, what you do is go back in time and heed warning and listen to what I originally told you to do. So therein lies that conundrum that professors face when you tell folks to do something, students, they do something totally opposite. Now, John wasn't upset with me by any means, of course, but he was upset with the situation and the advisor as well. Now, John also wanted someone local as an advisor, which is perfectly fine. I hear that quite a bit. But folks, these days with technology, I do a ton of Zoom. I'm not advocating for my services, but I don't know if that really definitely doesn't hold as much water as it used to, being local. We can jump on a phone call via Zoom at any point. So what ended up happening with this fella, John? Today, he is a client of mine. I took him over, and we actually implemented a strategy for his illiquid account that neither John nor the advisor knew was even available. I took those monies away from where the monies were custodied, and now it's at Charles Schwab. That's where I custody my assets. And we implemented, and again, I'm going to do this on a different episode, but more of an income-producing portfolio. This advisor had him in a stock portfolio that was looking for a baseball analogy, they were looking for triples, but John had plenty of money. If done correctly, drawing income from this portfolio, the income, the interest and dividends produced from this portfolio should outlive him 2 times over. So why introduce that risk? It just didn't make sense to me. So John kind of learned the hard way of some of these things. And I tell you what, I cannot stress this enough, folks. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've talked to enough people in your place, in your shoes, a lot of very smarter folks than myself, okay? Try to figure out this TIAA traditional / CREF account, plural, accounts, plural, and fail. Not because they're not intelligent, but because you call TIA, and God bless them, they're great folks. I'm on the phone with them constantly. They are fantastic. But there's so many nuances to these things that you don't even know what questions to ask. Therefore, they don't know what answers to give you. Now, the reason I kind of stress that is there may be some questions that you should ask, but the rep from TIA doesn't know what you're looking for, so they don't provide that information. It's not like they're omitting information. They still know the information to provide. Okay, folks, it gets very, very confusing. I run into folks all the time that wish they never even would have started with TIAA CREF due to the illiquidity and nuances of these accounts on the back end, on the exit side, on the distribution side. I'm not advocating not using TIA. That's not what I'm saying. They're a great company. They do a great job at what they do. But it's very difficult. Make sure you do your due diligence. By all means, contact me, and I'll see what I can do to help you out. I do it all the time. Again, email greg@shepherdfinancial.com. I'll throw down in the show notes a link to my Calendly. I got to say that slowly. Calendly link where you can jump on my calendar for a 30-minute phone call or Zoom meeting, depending upon what you're looking for. All right, folks, deep breath. All right, that's all I have for today. In closing, as I always state, folks, go out there and take control of your retirement today. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Retire Podcast. Just because this episode is over doesn't mean you can't continue your retirement journey. Please visit www.higheredretire.com to see how you can work with Greg or to simply ask him a question. Thanks again.
S&A Financial Services is a registered investment advisor. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Be sure to first consult with a qualified financial advisor and/or tax professional before implementing any strategy discussed herein. Past performance is not indicative of future performance.